Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are in day 93 of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, and right now we are seeing some of the most heaviest capabilities of the Russian military in terms of focused and sustained heavy artillery attacks taking place in the eastern areas of the Donbass. And I've decided to use this map to give you, the viewer, a fairly good idea that shows you examples of where some of the most heaviest fighting is taking place. And obviously you can really kind of see a common theme in terms of what the Russians are trying to do in terms of some of their pressure tactics that are being utilized in the eastern Donbass. Now, first and foremost, we can report that the town of Lyman has fallen to Russian forces. Now, is this a major victory for Russian forces? I would say no, it's not. Obviously, there were some Ukrainian forces that were still positioned in Lyman, and now the possibility about those forces escaping south or southwest is actually called into question now because many of these bridges over the Sovetski Donets River have been destroyed. Now, the real challenge for Russian forces is going to be to continue to move this line forward and eventually look to cross the Sovetski Donets River. Now, I don't believe at this point the Russians will launch a all-out offensive in the direction coming from Lyman towards Sloviansk down this major highway here. Again, this would require major bridging operations over these water terrain features. And again, it's just not one, it's a multitude of terrain features, and then it is also located in some fairly heavily forested areas where we can anticipate that both the Ukrainian forces have pre-plots on these locales if the Russians attempt to advance towards Sloviansk from this direction. And then obviously, furthermore, Ukrainian anti-tank guided weapons teams, which are still operating in the smaller outlying forests and villages around these areas. So the likelihood we'll see some sort of rapid advance of Russian forces to Sloviansk is relatively remote. Now, with that being said, we will probably see the Russians start to increase pressure towards Sloviansk in the form of heavy artillery. Now, where the real Russian pressure is ongoing and continues as we speak and it runs from the environments of Severodonetsk all the way south towards Donetsk itself, and even a little bit south of Donetsk. So we are seeing an incredible array of Russian firepower that has been amassed in this area, and we are now seeing the full weight and capability of the Russian heavy artillery capability, and you can feel it on the Ukrainian end as well. Some of the information that is coming in, especially from localized sources, in terms of some of the types of fighting that is being seen and the pressure that the Ukrainian military is under, you absolutely know that the Ukrainian forces are feeling it, and you also know, and you can also hear it in the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, in which they are continuing to pressure the European Union, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and other nation states to give them the weapons that they need to continue to fight, because they are starting to feel now the full weight and pressure of this non-stop Russian campaign that has been ongoing. So the question is right now, are the Ukrainian force construct that is positioned in the eastern Donbass at this point getting close to collapse? And it's very possible. We could be in the early stages of such a collapse. The Ukrainians have been taking a tremendous amount of casualties, especially over the last 30 days, as the Russians have changed strategy and tactics and have really kind of focused on utilizing their tactical air efforts in this area, but at the same time the widespread use of massive amounts of heavy artillery and sustained heavy artillery in these areas. So, while the Ukrainian military obviously has not collapsed as of yet, I would say at this point it is under immense pressure in this area in terms of being able to supply its forces, and then two, those forces that are under constant pressure, and at some point these forces are going to break, given the withering fire that these forces are under. They have performed admirably over the course of the conflict, but at a certain point, you can only do so much as a military unit, depending on the opposing force that you are facing. And unfortunately for the Ukrainians, they don't have the active use of tactical air assets. They can't call for direct air support in some of these ongoing engagements. All they can really do is hunker down in some of these defensive positions and just get pummeled by a variety of very large Russian systems that have been brought up for this conflict, and that's kind of what we're seeing right now within the confines of this battle space. But you can clearly see near Popasna that the Russians are now widening its control of this area. What's very interesting, we're not seeing some of the tactics that we saw earlier in the campaign, where the Russians would dash out and you would have this long salient, this very, very narrow corridor that was narrow in width but very long in length, as the Russians attempted these mechanized drives towards targets deep in the Ukrainian rear, and that allowed the Ukrainians to then maneuver and attack the supply columns of these forces. Much different right now in terms of what you're seeing near Popasna. It is a bulge, it is a salient, but it is much more wider, and the Russians are trying to maintain control of a fairly large area as they press forward across a broad front, as opposed to a much narrow front, kind of forming that very thin salient as it is talked about. But the Russians continue to advance and press forward and look to encircle both Lysychansk and Severodonetsk at this point. In terms of the seizure of Lyman and then further operations towards Sloviansk, I don't think that's going to occur until the Russians have completely encircled and eventually look to destroy those Ukrainian units, if Ukrainian units stay in this pocket and do not withdraw. Outside of that, you could see eventually the collapse of this pocket, and then the front line then basically start to take shape, running from a line from Horlovika up towards Lyman in kind of in this direction here, and then in all probability the front lines will slowly start to enclose and look. You'll see Russian forces on the outskirts of Bakhmut, and then kind of up here along this highway towards Kramatorsk and then Sloviansk, and then you'll have to watch what happens with Russian forces near Izum. Will they then launch a major offensive looking to get into the rear of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, and then look for another encirclement operation, the same as we're seeing right now in Severodonetsk and Lysychansk? And I think that is the strategy that we're going to see from Russian forces at this point. And right now, that strategy appears to be working for Russian forces. The Russians are really right now trying not to see casualties inflicted upon its forces, and are really trying to use its heavy artillery and then limited movement when needed to continue its momentum forward. But that's kind of what we're seeing right now. And again, the pressure and the intensity of the continued Russian attacks that range from south of Donetsk all the way in this wide arc is very very intense at this point, and it's causing the Ukrainians some problems, and it's not something that the Ukrainians have experienced prior. Obviously, they did see some very intense fighting in areas such as Kiev and areas near Chernihiv and Konotop and such, and Sumy. But those were large mechanized drives that were restricted to main roadways and such. This is much different, what we're seeing right now in the eastern Donbass, and it's different for the Ukrainians. And it is causing some problems. Now, the question is will the West continue to continue to supply weapons and equipment in the rate that the Ukrainian army needs to continue to provide an adequate defense against Russian forces? And it's difficult to say at this point. It really is, given the nature of the conflict and the continued strikes that the Russians continue on rear areas deep inside of Ukraine. But obviously, the United States and some other countries are continuing to supply direct support to Ukraine. Are the Ukrainians going to get the HIMARS and some of these other long-range systems that they're requesting for? And I think they want some of those systems where they can attempt to strike very very deep into the Russian rear to continue to kind of up the ante. And I think that's what the U.S. is concerned about. And would that widen the war? Would the Russians see that as a final escalation where they could end up targeting areas in Poland or Romania? And would it give the Russians the opportunity to strike out at the Aegis Ashore system located in Romania? Very difficult to say, but we could see some sort of escalation as these various types of high-end arms continue its inflow into Ukraine. Another point of note: the CEO for Palantir believes, and obviously their software is some very advanced analytics that can predict the outcome in certain end games of certain conflicts and kind of where we're heading. And right now, he was talking about a 20 to 30% chance of wide scale conflict outside of the scope of just Ukraine, to include the possible release of nuclear weapons. So I think that that estimate is sobering, and that is real data, folks. That that the software company Palantir plays in, and it's their wheelhouse. It's what they understand, and unfortunately, as I had talked about previously, I think we're heading down a path that that no one really understands fully yet, and I think at least in the mainstream West, the likelihood of escalation is around probably 1 to 3%. In the reality, it's probably much higher, especially with what we're seeing right now taking place in Ukraine. It's just something that we've never seen before. We never observed this during the Cold War at any point in time, really. And the last major, what you could call war that resembled what we're seeing right now is probably in Korea. I don't believe even Vietnam we saw the intensity that we're seeing now. I mean, we haven't hit the total war switch yet. We're not seeing the Russians carpet bomb large cities such as Kiev and shutting down the power networks in Ukraine and going after some of the higher echelon command and control inside of Ukraine. As of yet, could that happen in the near future? Yes, absolutely. And again, that's kind of going down that road of escalation. But Right now, the pressure for Ukrainian forces that the Ukrainian forces are under right now is incredibly immense, and the question is can they continue to weather this ongoing attack by Russian forces that we're seeing right now? And that's what we have for today. Obviously, we will continue to monitor, report, and bring you content for your consumption. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, everybody.